Welcome to the program. You're listening to Business in Vancouver on Roundhouse Radio 98.3. We're the daily business program from the Business in Vancouver newspaper and our website, bib.com. I'm Kirk LaPointe.
I'm Haley Wooden. We're continuing our discussion on cannabis today by merging two of the most talked about topics in Canada, really, the legalization of recreational marijuana and real estate. A new white paper from Colliers International expects legalization to have a profound impact on commercial real estate here in Metro Vancouver. Producers will also face some challenges in finding industrial land, which is already in short supply. So the paper argues that BC's agricultural land reserve may provide a viable alternative for recreational cannabis companies. Joining us now with more on this is Andrew Rojek, Market Intelligence Manager for Western Canada at Colliers International, one of the authors of the report, Cannabis and ALR, Keep the Land, Cultivate the Future. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me.
I thought all this agricultural land was just to put monster homes on in Richmond. That was the whole thing, isn't it? Is it a wise idea to allow a lot of the ALR into the cannabis sector?
Well, I think it presents a pretty big opportunity. Whether it's wise or not is probably for some people much smarter and that get paid more than me to decide, being that the ALC. But what it certainly does provide is an opportunity for what is really an agricultural product. And we do need to start thinking of it that way. If it does go through with being legalised, as the federal government has sort of indicated that it will this year, it is an agricultural product, and it comes with certain connotations and a different history than some other ones. But it needs a place to be produced. There's a huge economy built around it, or there will be certainly. And there's a really important question of where it goes. And in Vancouver, especially with vacancy for industrial facilities, by our numbers at about 1.5%, it's certainly not a balanced market. And we have a huge problem at the moment of trying to find space already for traditional industrial occupiers. So, entering into that market, a huge beast of a new industry, figures from, I think, Deloitte said in the first year it might be as big as $5 billion, which for context is about the size of the Canadian spirit market. So it's a really big industry, and we need to find a home for it. And we think that the ALR, presents some kind of an opportunity for that.
And as I understand it, medical marijuana producers already have access to ALR land, right?
That's correct. So the ALC has supported the medicinal cannabis or medical marijuana production on ALR land. So, an extension of that we think is, potentially viable, but obviously that's up to the ALC and to dictate.
Mm-hmm. I've heard Delta Mayor Lois Jackson already on about her own concerns involving this, that this is perhaps, it's a zero-sum game. If you're growing cannabis on the one hand, you can't be growing tomatoes or asparagus or whatever it is you're going to do on the other, and that the food supply may somehow be threatened by this. Is that something that we have to now contend with in terms of a debate in society?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting question and a really good point. I don't necessarily know if it's a zero-sum game. One of the benefits of the production of cannabis is that it can be grown in greenhouses. Greenhouses can be established on, not all agricultural land is created equal, and there's agricultural tracts of land that aren't particularly suited to producing crops on them. That greenhouses can go on to produce cannabis. So they sort of provide an alternative. And, the ALR was established to provide for agricultural production and protect agricultural production. Food is an essential part of that, but it's for all agricultural products. So barley for beer, grapes for wine, and potentially cannabis if the recreational.
So we just have this early apprehension about what we're really dealing with here, when in fact we are already ensconced in agriculture that is serving off, say, the other self-soothing legal products.
I think so. And part of, I guess, the concern with the cannabis industry is the uncertainty around how big it will be and what the future of it will hold, because we have some indications of the potential size of it, and those indications are that it will be really large, but we don't really know exactly how big it will be and how much of an impact it'll have on the ALR if it does get support to be grown there, or on the industrial markets and those sorts of things. But it's a really big opportunity for Vancouver, I think, and some of the really big cannabis companies have already indicated that if the rest of the world goes the way of Canada and starts to look at legalizing recreational cannabis, that almost being the first ones there in a way gives us an opportunity to potentially be an be an exporter of cannabis to the rest of the world. And so it is a really, really big opportunity for some of these companies. So we are working with owners of land and occupiers around what their strategy might be, regardless of what happens with the ALR and the ALC.
We're speaking to Andrew Rojek. He's a market intelligence manager for Western Canada at Colliers International and the author of a new report, Cannabis and ALR. It suggests that maybe using ALR for recreational cannabis production could be a good solution. In working with producers in the medical space, what are their needs and how important is location for their production facilities? Could they go outside of Metro Vancouver? Would that work for the product?
Yeah, well, we have brokers that work with these guys really, really closely, who would have a far better understanding of exactly what their requirements are than I would. But my understanding is that to a certain degree, it's flexible. But like all industrial users, they have a requirement for access to transport. They need to be able to move their products around. But there is the flexibility of, it can be produced in an existing traditional industrial warehouse type facility or on a greenhouse. So there is a little bit of flexibility around how it's produced. The greenhouse option does have, I guess, some of the benefits around it's a little bit better for the environment, cost savings, uses like less electricity and things like that.
Is there going to be a security issue involving farmland or a land at all that is going to be producing this?
Yeah, that's another really interesting question, and I don't know if there's necessarily going to be a security issue, but the producers will certainly have to be careful of security. I was asked this question the other day, and I gave it a little bit of thought, and there's existing industrial users that need excellent security. If you're producing any high value good, TVs, iPhones, whatever the case may be, you probably need pretty good security. Mm-hmm. So whether there is a part of the federal act that should it be passed that sort of dictates exactly how security is to be sort of enforced or how it occurs, I'm not sure, and I'm not totally across the exact wording of the. But
we're not necessarily going to see farms surrounded by high fences and barbed
wires.
Armed guards. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. So yeah,
we can't talk about real estate in Metro Vancouver without talking about price, and certainly industrial land prices and real estate have gone up significantly year over year. What sort of options does that leave cannabis producers with, and how may ALR land fit into that equation?
Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest talking points in Vancouver across every single type of real estate, residential, commercial, retail, whatever the case may be. It, if the ALC chooses not to support recreational cannabis being grown on the ALR, that's totally up to them, and that's fine. But what it does do is introduce another really large industry, like I said earlier, into the existing market. And pricing for industrial in Vancouver is extremely high, which is a product of, one, the sort of low supply that we have, and the huge amount of demand that we have. And we'd probably run the risk of either potentially losing existing industrial users or users that are looking to come to Vancouver and can't, or otherwise cannabis producers who look to come to Vancouver but can't. So, we have a finite amount of space and a growing demand base, and potentially a significantly growing demand base if we have recreational cannabis legalized. So, because
it's not clear, at least in the early going, on the basis of even the recent Supreme Court decision or the Comeau decision, about whether we're going to be able to get a supply of cannabis from, say, Alberta, where there are very clearly some big plants being created in places like Edmonton and now Medicine Hat. Is this the kind of thing where British Columbians are going to have to grow for themselves, and therefore turning to the ALR has to make some sense, because otherwise it's not going to fulfill the legitimate supply that needs to be here.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that's going to end up looking, but if it is something that needs to be a BC product for BC residents, then I think that makes an even stronger case for the use of the ALR, because there is a little bit more land availability for industrial facilities in the middle of the country, or as you move sort of further east, but it's extremely tight here. So if it does end up, like you said, being a BC product for BC residents only, then that becomes a really, really competitive market, and we would see an extra level of competition in the industrial market that's already at or near record pricing. So it would be really tough.
As we await a decision for recreational marijuana, on the medical side, how much activity has there been with companies choosing to actually move production onto ALR land?
Yeah, so in the report, we do sort of outline a few instances of where that's happened. And there've been pretty significant operations that have been taken up. All of those occurred fairly recently. I'm not aware of any that are ongoing right now in terms of deals that are underway, but there certainly could be. So there are groups that are looking at it, or have made acquisitions for medicinal cannabis purposes already.
Great. Well, Andrew, really appreciate you coming on the program to shed some light on a different angle to this emerging industry. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
That's Andrew Rojek. He's a market intelligence manager for Western Canada with Colliers International. You're listening to Business in Vancouver on Roundhouse Radio 98.3. I'm Haley Wooden.
And I'm Kirk LaPointe. Stay with us. We'll be back after this short break here on Roundhouse Radio 98.3.